I do take risks on stage, and sometimes it doesn't always work out. Depending on the show, I might take less or more risks. If the crowd's already with us when we start, and it's, I might try to do something really extra special, and if it works out, then it's amazing, and if they're into it, then I'm feeling more confident, and then there's a better chance that whatever risky things I might attempt will go well.
Hey everybody, Keith Billick here. Greetings and welcome back to the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. How's everyone doing out there? I hope you are enjoying the beginning of your spring. Things are coming back to life. Hopefully you are getting a lot of banjo playing and prospective banjo playing, or maybe attending shows where banjos will be played. Hopefully all of that is coming back to your life. And I must say it's coming back to mine, and I'm very happy about that. So let's get into a few announcements here. First of all, I will be attending as the official podcast liaison to Delfest next month. Delfest is, of course, the festival. It's in Maryland, and it's run by the Del McCoury Band, and has just an unbelievable slate of talented performers, and they are allowing me to set up a podcast booth. So I look forward to bringing you tales and news and interviews from Delfest. And of course, if any of you are going to be there, feel free to reach out to me, and maybe we can say hey and put some names with faces. It's always cool to meet some listeners. Although I was supposed to attend last year's Delfest, and I probably made this same announcement and then it got canceled, but I don't learn my lesson about jinxing things like this. So totally stoked for Delfest next month. The other really cool recent thing is your boy Keith is in a band. I have played gigs over the years, but these last several years have mostly been just as a hired sideman here and there, nothing too consistent, but I have a good group together, and we decided to give it a go. We're called Wilson Thicket. So anybody who is interested in hearing what I do on the banjo and what I'm involved in, please just go search out Wilson Thicket either on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And we don't have much out there, but you might be able to see a video, and I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more about it from me as we get busier and release some new music, because really, what's the point of having a podcast if I can't just shamelessly promote my own stuff? So that's my news on that. I'm sure you'll hear more about Wilson Thicket, but that's what I'm doing. And then last, but certainly not least, another thing I'm excited for is to let you know about my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/banjopodcast. And I've actually made a couple changes. One of the rewards, there are all sorts of benefits to supporting the show. Of course, the main one is you're supporting the show and keeping it running. Another one is the monthly VIP lounge. I have changed the reward structure so that anybody at any level of Patreon membership gets invited to the monthly VIP lounge video meetups, where we hang out and discuss banjos. Sometimes we play banjos, demonstrate, always give each other tips. A very supportive crowd. It's a lot of fun. And this month's VIP lounge is April 20th. That's a Wednesday, I believe, at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And like I said, if you head over to Patreon and sign up at any level before then, you will get the video invite to join up with us. And one of the listeners who you might see in the VIP lounge is this month's featured supporter. That's Ricky Stanfield. Ricky, thank you so much for signing up on Patreon and becoming a supporter of the show. Ricky is actually a Hall of Honor Patreon subscriber, which, as you all know, is the highest civilian honor bestowed onto Picky Fingers listeners. So thanks again, Ricky, and thanks everyone for going to patreon.com/banjopodcast. Also, feel free to get a hold of me for any other reason, just to say hey or to give comments or suggestions about the podcast, to meet up with me at Delfest, or to tell me that Wilson Thicket is the worst band name idea you've ever heard. You can reach me at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com.
never be found.
Today's featured guest is Alex Genova of the band Fireside Collective. I find Alex to be a tremendously exciting player, just a relentless, boundary-pushing creativity seems to happen with his playing, and we address plenty of that. He has attended both Berklee as well as East Tennessee State University in their bluegrass programs, and now actually teaches at East Tennessee State. So he is also academically minded, and this episode is really cool for that reason too. It is quite a banjo lesson. Alex really breaks down some interesting techniques and approaches to playing. So if you're like me, you're going to have to listen to this one a few times to absorb all the things that he has to say. Two other things of note about this episode before we get going. First of all, I definitely need to give a shout out and thanks to Tom, Tiny, Dannon, and everybody else over at Otis Supply, which is a venue in my hometown here in Ferndale, Michigan. They bring a lot of great music to town, and they are always supportive and accommodating when I beg them to bring in my recording equipment and record interviews with some of the talent there. And that's where this one was recorded. So if you hear restaurant-y sounds in the background, that explains it. And that's actually the other thing I wanted to mention is there was some weird audio interference on Alex's mic. It sounded like radio broadcast trying to come in or something like that. I think it's probably some banjo spies trying to infiltrate my interview and steal the secret information that Alex has. But you all know that I strive for really good audio quality, so it always bugs me when there's some flaws in it that I can't quite seem to figure out how to eliminate completely. But anyway, please enjoy this interview with Alex Genova of the Fireside Collective.
I'm from Madison, Wisconsin originally. I live in Nashville, Tennessee right now. But yeah, I grew up playing music, started really young, and in high school, I'd been playing guitar and a bunch of other instruments, and actually I switched from the marching band to the orchestra because I was into playing music in school, but not so much into the marching part.
Yeah.
So
I did many tours of marching bands, so I can relate.
Yeah. So I switched to try to do the orchestra, but I'd never played violin or any bowed stringed instruments before, and took some lessons with a guy in Madison who kind of got me into some old time music and different like fiddling styles. And at the same time, I'd been listening to some like jam bands and stuff, and got introduced to Old and in the Way and Yonder and Railroad Earth and those kinds of bands. And then took some lessons with some local guys. I was really lucky that there were some good banjo pickers around Madison, and they like turned me on to Earl and J.D. Crowe.
So you were already playing banjo at this point, not fiddle?
So I started with the fiddle first, I believe. It was about the same time. And then I bought a cheap banjo after like hearing some banjo music. The fiddle progress was going really slow.
Yeah.
And I had already been playing guitar since I was like 8 years old. So I was like, I think I could do that banjo thing a little quicker. I think I could pick that up a little quicker than I could the fiddle. So
well, it seems like you did that. So your initial influences were what? Old and in the Way, and is that what your teacher was trying to teach you about?
No, that was more like stuff I'd found on my own from listening to like The Dead and stuff. That fiddle teacher, he showed me Crooked Still for the first time, and some Bruce Molsky stuff. So that was like some more old time stuff. But it kind of like turned some some switches in my brain and got me kind of interested. I'd been listening to Old in the Way just on my own, and then then found some banjo teachers and got more into like the Crow stuff and the real traditional bluegrass, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. So what is this in high school?
Mm-hmm.
I assume?
That's right, yeah.
And at what point did you start finding maybe people to jam with? I assume that was like probably one of your goals when you start out playing is to try to find people to actually do this with.
Absolutely. So I think I went to like a beginner's jam in Madison. My mom like drove me out there, and it was fun, but I didn't really know a lot of like the standards or anything yet. And I had a little trio with a guitar player and a bass player in high school, and we did just like kind of our own bluegrass stuff, and then some covers. And then I didn't really like get heavy into jamming until I went to Berklee in Boston. And then started doing a little more jamming there, met some people to pick with there. And then I was only there a year because it just got a little too expensive for me. So I came back home and then felt like I really knew what I wanted to do, and found some local jams there. Plus then I was older and I could get into a bar easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then started going to like a weekly jam that was in Madison, and met some guys there, and we started a couple local bands and recorded an album or two. So that was like kind of my first introduction to like really playing in a more serious bluegrass band.
I mean, but you must have already known that you were wanting to take it a bit more seriously if you went to Berklee for it. You went to Berklee for banjo, I assume?
I did, yeah.
And who was your teacher there?
So I studied with Dave Hollander for a semester, and then I knew I was going to be leaving, so I took another semester with Daryl Anger, so it wasn't really super banjo focused, but just he had me doing all kinds of really cool stuff. So
he's
really,
out there.
He is, and I love that, and I really wanted to work with him, so it was fun.
Were you highly improvisational minded already? Because it sounds like if you were into jam bands and wanted to study with Daryl, that is kind of an avenue that both of those lead to.
I was, but I wasn't very good at it, but I was trying. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd played guitar, so I knew like my pentatonic scales and that kind of thing, and I figured out how to transfer that over to banjo. And that's actually one of the things I work on with my students now, is like making sure everybody knows their pentatonic scales all the way up the neck. And that was like a good place to start. But so, I would say I've always kind of been into like improvisational music, but it just took me a little while to get to a place where I felt like I was good at it.
Yeah. So I take it by what you said that you think that learning your pentatonic scales up and down the neck is like a good starting place for somebody who's interested in that. Do you care to like talk a bit more about that, or like what do you teach your students not to freeload off of your
absolutely.
your
I'm happy to share. Yeah, so we just go through like some positions. So there's like those 5, I think of it as just 5 different positions.
And these are all closed single string ways that you do it?
Yeah, closed positions. So basically it's kind of like thinking about if you wanted to, you could call it like the modes almost of a pentatonic scale. So just like starting on a different note. And then there's kind of some cool tricks you can do with it. You can like do double stops through it. You can make, fuller chords. And do scale patterns, that kind of stuff. And then, I try to have people do like, we do some like pull off kind of exercises. That kind of, stuff like that. I think that's like a good way to start thinking about single string, is just the pentatonic scales, because it's only 5 notes you got to remember, and then 5 positions. And I like base it out of like some kind of chord shapes, basically like this G minor. This is like at the 5th fret for anybody playing along. This is like your like standard G minor bar shape at the 5th and the 3rd fret. So if we do, let's just take like the first 3 strings. We can do like 5th fret, 1st string, 3rd fret on 2nd and 3rd strings. And then we can like shift this position up. And now I'm going from 1st string to 3rd string. Now we're at, 8, 6, and 5. And then we take that same shape and move it up a whole step. And now we're at 10, 8, and 9. 10, 8, and 7. And then we have this like B major shape. And then we're back to that second shape I mentioned. So it's really like only 3 kind of chord shapes. So this shape, which is also here and here, and then the B major and or B flat major, and G minor.
Is this almost like similar to playing the diatonic chords, except using just the pentatonic scale. It's the pentatonic chords.
Pretty much, yeah. So
each finger is just raising by one pentatonic degree.
That's right, yeah. Okay. So you're just going through... I wasn't
quite following how those were
So it's basically like, if you're starting on each fret, then you're going through the scale on each string. So each string is moving up one scale tone each time. So we'd work on stuff like that. That's kind of a good way to visualize it too. But yeah, that's just one of the things I work on with students.
It's almost a real like organ voicing type of sound to it.
I love it. It's a lot of fun to jam with. That kind of, you can get some cool...
And that would all work over like a G minor...
Absolutely,
vamp or something like that.
Right, yeah, or like a B-flat kind of bluesy kind of thing would work as well. Yeah, so you can use it in a few different situations.
Excellent. Are you able to point to anything that you... I don't know if I realized that you went to Berklee. I mean, you said you were only there a year. Are you able to point to anything else that you learned from your time there that was maybe particularly valuable that you still use?
Man, it was just, I had only been playing banjo like since high school. Like I said, I'd only really been playing a couple years, and I learned that I needed to practice more, that I was like in over my head, and I should go home and practice. And and so that's what I did then. But yeah, I mean, I just got exposed to different kinds of music. With Daryl, I worked on some really, like some Brazilian music that I'd not been into, and that was kind of fun. Some like choro. I probably can't remember it. Oh yeah, I'm gonna forget that too. No worries. But yeah, we just worked on like all sorts of different stuff that wasn't really banjo music. So that was one cool thing that kind of got me starting to think about other styles and genres. I at the time was kind of just thinking about banjo as a bluegrass thing mostly, or like the crazy stuff that Bela did. But it started to really get me like seriously thinking about all the possibilities and
just an instrument that you can apply to whatever you come across.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you said you also went back to discover more traditional guys. I think you mentioned JD.
Yeah.
Who are those? Do you consider your main influences, at least in the early days? And what do you think you learned from each of them?
Yeah. So like JD in particular, and Earl, of course, too. Like, man, I think that's just like a really good place to start, just to get like your tone right and your timing right, and to just get like just work on your right hand, and the timing to me is, and the tone, and but timing in particular and groove is like so important, and that's one of the things that he just really had down. So I spent a lot of time just like playing with bluegrass album band recordings, and I work on that kind of stuff with my students now too.
Is that the primary way that you've worked on your own timing, is playing along with those recordings? At
first, yeah. Like, I mean, now I'm doing other things. I'm trying to like play bebop and other stuff.
Right. But I'll definitely cover that with you too.
Cool. Yes, that. And then also like I played with a band out of Seattle for a while, and I used to sleep in the Sprinter van that we had. It was a wild time for me. But yeah, we had Sirius XM in the van, and I'd turn on like Bluegrass Junction and just try to play along with like the kind of modern drive-in bluegrass, kind of downbeat heavy kind of stuff. And I spent a lot of time trying to get good at that, so I could really have like super tight timing, like that sound. But I also love, like the bounce and the groove of like the older kind of stuff, like JD's, I love that feel too. So I just was trying to kind of get down the different grooves that the banjo is responsible for in a bluegrass band, basically, and try to play all that first, and then kind of branched out after that.
And did you end up at ETSU at some point?
I did, yeah. So I like I mentioned, I played with a band out of Seattle for a couple years, and then things kind of fell apart, and people were wanting to go in different directions. So I wanted to finish school, and I ended up at ETSU and loved it, and had a great time there, and got to kind of refine my bluegrass skills there, and also work on some more progressive stuff. So it was an awesome place for me. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, go for it.
All the same things that I was wondering about Berklee, I'd be equally curious to hear about ETSU in terms of like who your teachers were, how they helped you, and what you learned that you are maybe still using or are important to what you do.
Absolutely. So my banjo teacher was a guy named Brandon Green, and he's like a great progressive player and does a bunch of really cool like progressive stuff, melodic stuff, single string stuff. He had me working on like Scott Vestal stuff. So we learned a lot of Scott Vestal breaks and, like a lot of the Bluegrass 95 stuff I learned and we worked on together. Yeah. So that was really cool. Love Scott's playing. And it was kind of like that kind of deal, just like working on transcribing solos and learning breaks. And he had some tab for some of it too. And just kind of like going over it together and like, oh, what do you think he's playing there? I don't know. What did you have? Oh, show me how you did that kind of thing. So that was really good. But then I also got to work with a guy named Mike Bagetta, who is a jazz guitar player, and he was kind of in the jazz department. And I learned a lot from Mike about theory, and he's like been a huge influence on me and really like kind of changed the way I see music. And
So yeah, let's talk about that. I would love to hear about those things if you think it had such a big effect, if you're able to remember some of the things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of just like the basics of jazz theory stuff, like using diminished scales, for example, you know, like the half whole and whole half diminished scale. And I use that kind of stuff in my soloing. But then, you know, just talking about like with the diminished scale, there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. I mean, you could use it to solo over a diminished chord if one comes up in a tune you're playing. But you can also, you know, you could play it over if you're into kind of more progressive bluegrass and the band's doing like, say, just like a G7 Mixolydian kind of jam. So I'm kind of just using those different positions to land somewhere around G and then kind of resolve there back eventually. That kind of thing.
So is the rule of thumb to use a diminished scale that starts on a G but contains a G if it's over that G seventh? I know there's only like 4 diminished scales.
Right, yeah. So I kind of think about it, like if we were to play in G7, say, the way I think about it is like I would start, I mean, there's a few places you could start, but usually I think about starting on G or B flat or D flat or E. And it's going up.
Arpeggio.
A minor third. Yeah, your arpeggio, exactly. And you could also start a half step up from all of those too, and then start with a whole step instead of a half step. So you could do that as well. But one of the things that he showed me that was also really cool is like all the arpeggios that you can get out of that one G half whole diminished scale, you know, so you have, you know, G major triad, B flat major triad, D flat, E flat, and then also all of those same chords but minor triads, and then also all of those chords like diminished with the flat 9. So, you know, you can do some cool like kind of chordal stuff too. That, you know, that kind of stuff. Triad pairs using like 2 triads to solo together. So he really gave me a lot of ideas. And that's just talking about the diminished scale. I could keep going on, but we really talked about like a ton of theory stuff that I really dove into and tried to figure out how to make it work on the banjo.
Do you feel like that required? I mean, you said try to make it work on the banjo, but how much did you actually have to dive into jazz repertoire to internalize some of that?
So luckily, I play with a band that's kind of jammy, very jammy actually. We kind of go back and forth a little bit, but you know, we'll do a lot of kind of open jams. So luckily, it kind of let me try out some of these ideas in a like more low stakes environment where I didn't have to go to a jazz jam and try it over a bebop tune with you know, a straight jazz instrumentation.
Where they're already skeptical of why is this banjo on?
Exactly. Yeah. So actually, it wasn't that bad, and I think getting the jazz repertoire part is the part that's I'm still working on that, and that's kind of coming later for me. But some of these ideas that come from like jazz and jazz adjacent music and some classical ideas obviously too. But those things I was lucky to be able to like try it out with this band Fireside Collective that I'm playing with, and so that's kind of been my thing that I've been working on, throwing those kinds of ideas into like jamgrass stuff.
If there are progressive-minded bluegrass players out there that want to incorporate just some jazzy sounds into their playing, whatever that means, what you just showed us, is that what you would recommend they start with as like a good...
That's one thing they could start with. Another thing they could think about that's kind of an easy one to start with is like upper structures of chords. Like thinking about, so if we say we're doing G7, so we can do like a G7 arpeggio. So that's like G, B, D, F. And that would be like 1, 3, 5, 7. But then we can also do 3, 5, 7, 9. So just for those of you listening, I'm starting at like your standard 5th fret G position, 5th fret on 4th string, 4th fret 3rd string, and then barring 3rd fret 1st and 2nd string, and then I shift up to 9th fret, and I'm doing like basically what's like a B half diminished chord, but it's just a 3, 5, 7, and then 9 of a G7 chord. So now we have B, D, F, and A.
Yeah.
And then I'm shifting up to 12th fret on my 4th string. And then that's like a D minor 7 chord, but it's also 5, 7, 9, 11.
Yeah.
And then we can shift up and we can do an F major 7 chord, and it's 7, 9, 11, 13. So if you're in a G7 jam, you can use all those chords. And so that's a cool, some cool sounds to mess with that's not so bad. And you can do the same thing for major 7 chords too. Make sure you add the sharp 11 for major 7 chords. That's kind of a rule that otherwise it clashes with another note in the chord. But,
okay.
But yeah, so upper structures is a really cool idea to mess with. And then there's, other things you can do with them from there. For progressive-minded folks, too, I think just learning your modes of the major scale is a really good place to start, too. And that's something that I do with my students as well. I usually start with, like, a chord shape. So, like, a G triad or a G major 7. And then shift up A minor 7. And just go through the chords.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yeah,
I noticed you're doing all of this with a single string technique.
Yeah.
Talk about that and why you find that maybe more useful than trying to incorporate melodics, or maybe even how did you work on getting so good at that technique? Because that is something that's really tough for a lot of people.
Yeah, so I try to play, I like melodic style a lot too, and melodic style for me like works really well with something like a fiddle tune where you can use open strings, but thinking about more like jazz-minded stuff, if we're talking about like jazz tunes, for example, there's a lot of modulations, so we're not staying in the same key. We're moving around a lot. So having closed positions that you can move between is really important to be able to improvise that way. So I also have worked on the modes in like a more melodic way. I don't know if you've ever seen the gnome cell things he does, the 4-note cells. Yes. And then he expands that to like the larger groups and goes all the way through the modes that way. So that's really cool too. And I've worked on that as well. And I do that with students sometimes too. But I kind of prefer the single string for, at least, I guess, just in general, I think I kind of prefer the single string style. I like the way it sounds, and I like the way it's easy to kind of move around under my fingers. And then, like I said, for the jazz stuff, when you're, modulating between keys, like, if you're on a tune like Cherokee, it's just going down in whole steps. that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
helps you keep track of everything.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how I would start approaching that in melodic. Although I know, like, you've had Pat Cloud on, and he does that, and Bill Keith was doing stuff like that. So it can be done, but I haven't really messed with it that much.
Takes a lot of concentration, I imagine. I haven't figured it out either.
Yeah.
That's cool. Hey folks, there has never been a better time to learn banjo online through video lessons, and the best game in town is Peghead Nation, one of our sponsors. With Peghead Nation's streaming video courses in banjo, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, dobro, upright bass, and ukulele, you'll be able to learn bluegrass, old time, and plenty of other styles from some of the most talented players and instructors in roots music. PegheadNation.com features a great lineup of banjo instruction with some of these courses. Check it out. Beginning Banjo with Bill Evans, Bluegrass Banjo with Bill Evans, Clawhammer Banjo with Evie Layden, Wade Ward Style Banjo with Bruce Molsky, the Banjo According to Danny Barnes, and Contemporary Bluegrass Banjo with Wes Corbett. Now, no matter what course you select, they're all going to come with high-quality multi-angle video lessons, downloadable notation, plenty of tab, play-along tracks, and tunes and songs for you to learn. Perhaps best of all, if you join any of these Peghead Nation video courses now, you'll get your first month free just for being a Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast listener. So just go to pegheadnation.com and use the promo code PickyFingers at checkout. Another sponsor of the show is GHS Strings. We banjo players know that a banjo is only as good as the quality of strings that you put on it, and GHS has a long track record of providing the top quality in banjo strings to some of the top industry professionals such as Bela Fleck, J.D. Crow, Sonny Osborne, Todd Taylor, and me. I'm a GHS user. So check them out at ghsstrings.com. Now, if you ask me where I go to purchase my GHS strings, that answer is simple. It's the same place that I go for all of my banjo, guitar, and any other stringed instrument needs. It's Elderly Instruments here in Lansing, Michigan. They've been family-owned since 1972, and it's the world's most trusted source for new, used, and vintage instruments and all the accessories and strings that you might need. Now, if you aren't close enough to Lansing, Michigan to visit them in person, you can also see their entire inventory online at elderly.com, or feel free to give them a call to speak to a knowledgeable salesperson at 517-372-7880, or once again, see what they have at elderly.com. So I think I previewed one of the questions that I got in from Facebook that was about ETSU.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you've actually taken on a teaching role there.
Mm-hmm.
The question was basically talking about your time, and I think the person who asked the question wanted to know how welcoming it was to a northerner.
Yeah.
B, a northerner who likes to play crazy jazzy stuff.
Yeah.
And just the general vibe of it there. I think they wanted to know. And of course, now that you're on faculty or whatever, you can speak a bit more. I assume it's more welcoming to you if that's your job. So I don't know, just tell us what you have to say. Give us the spiel about the program.
They've been really great. I seriously have nothing but good things to say about ETSU. I absolutely love it there. It was an honor to be asked to teach there, and I feel really lucky that I get to do that. But when I was a student there, I was also a little unsure about that because it was kind of more of like a traditional scene, or at least that's the reputation it has.
Yeah.
As being kind of more like a lot of the students who go there end up graduating and playing in kind of like the modern kind of traditional stuff, the stuff you hear on Sirius XM, those kinds of artists,
right.
But that said, there are a ton of great progressive players there as well. I was there at the same time as like Thomas Castle and his brother Will and Trey Wellington's
Trey
another.
There? Okay,
Yeah,
I was
he's
wondering that.
great. Yeah, there's a kid who's taking lessons with me right now named Justin Alexander, who is an awesome banjo player. He's great. So watch out for that dude. Jacob Metz was taking lessons with me, and he's playing with Darren and Brooke at Aldridge now. He's killer. They're doing some kind of progressive stuff, and they've had like Matt Menifee was playing banjo with them for a while and have some really cool banjo parts on some of their recordings. Yeah, I mean, right now, Brittany Haas is leading the progressive band, so it doesn't get much.
Doesn't get better than that.
No, absolutely.
That's
so,
cool.
I've been like jealous. I was like, been wishing I was a student and could play in the progressive band. Should
have stuck with the fiddle.
I know, right? I should go back. But it's been great, and now you could take progressive banjo lessons with me. So I'll be very welcoming, and everybody's super nice. It's a great place. I recommend it highly.
And I think another part of the question, now that I think about it, was what are the networking aspects that you were able to take advantage of as well, or do you think that was an important aspect of
I do. I mean, I got the job. I got both jobs that I have right now, teaching there and playing with Fireside Collective, because I lived in the area, and it's really close to Asheville, which is a huge progressive music hub, bluegrass included, and there's traditional stuff obviously around too. But just like a ton of bluegrass musicians in the area, it's not that far from Nashville. It kind of depends, like who's there at the same time as you, but it's a great place to meet people and jam, and there's always parties and events happening that you can get out and jam at. So and just to go back to like the part about like being welcome and like what you could get out of it if you're looking for more of a progressive experience, is what I did was take lessons with some jazz faculty, and that really
the fellow who you already were mentioning. Yeah.
So, if you're interested in other styles of music as well, they have a classical music department and a jazz department that are both really great. So you're
allowed to.
You are absolutely
take
allowed.
classes outside of your focus area or major or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So was taking. Cool. I was bringing my banjo to a jazz guitar lesson weekly, and it was awesome. So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. You said that was somehow responsible for you getting into your current band, Fireside Collective. Tell us how that happened, and tell us about that band and what your approach is like playing with them.
Absolutely. So I had actually met them before I moved down there briefly. I mentioned I was playing with that band from Seattle called the Blackberry Bushes, but we'd met in Colorado. I think we played a show together actually in Fort Collins, I believe. And then when I went down to ETSU, I met Joe, their guitar player, and we had classes together and played in some school bands and stuff together.
Oh, he was going to school?
Yeah, he was also at ETSU, yeah. And then the other three guys were living in Asheville. And I'd been kind of looking for a band, and I'd auditioned for a few other bands, but nothing had really worked out the way I wanted it to. But Joe called me one summer, like shortly after school had ended, and I'd gone back to stay with my parents in Wisconsin and visit for a little while. Mm-hmm. And he asked if I could come down and play some shows and do an audition, and I did. And I've been in the band ever since.
Worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
That's cool. So just for listeners who maybe aren't familiar, tell us about that band and how you see your role and what you guys are all about. Yeah, so we're kind of things are kind of changing as we go, but it's a really fun band to play in. We're pretty progressive, I would say. Others might not say that. I don't know. It depends what you feel is traditional and what you feel isn't. But our mandolin player Jesse writes a lot of the songs, but we also kind of share those duties, and so more people are starting to write more material. I've written a couple instrumentals that we do, or one we've recorded. Yeah, so my role is just kind of banjo man, and playing. I take a lot of the jammy parts, and I've helped arrange a lot of the instrumental stuff that we do.
Tennessee, she's the sweetest one to me.
But I take it how you're describing the group that you don't necessarily feel like you need to be locked into a bluegrass album band sounding
No.
approach. You can kind of do whatever you feel is necessary, I take it?
Yeah, pretty much.
appropriate?
Yeah, I feel lucky. They've kind of given me free reign to play how I want, which is awesome. And I know that not everybody gets to do that, so it's really cool for me. And yeah, it's fun. They bring a lot of interesting material, and sometimes honestly, it's like, oh man, I don't know how I'm gonna fit a banjo roll over this groove, or should I chop? Should I roll over it? And I usually find something to do. So
Are there any examples of that you can think of? Maybe something that, and I know it's hard to demonstrate what the whole band is doing right here, but maybe talk about something that was challenging to find a place for yourself and how you worked through that.
Sure. Well, like one we do is like an Elton John song, "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road."
Sure.
And it goes into a bluegrass groove, but it starts kind of slow, and so I wasn't really sure if I should roll. I was kind of just all right. Now that kind of. That kind of feel.
Okay.
So that, one example of what, like, not a typical bluegrass thing. And
Sure.
There's some other songs kind of similar to that kind of vibe where I'm kind of doing more of like a chunky kind of sound. That kind of
A little more
thing.
minimalist,
Yeah.
maybe than
Yeah.
what were our normal reflexes to just fire up the rolls and go for it.
Yeah, and that was a little difficult for me at first to kind of figure out what to do in those situations, but but in other situations I get to kind of do the opposite extreme, so
Sure.
It's kind of a balance.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned that you wrote at least one instrumental that you have recorded.
Yeah.
Is writing a big part of what you do, you think? And
For me, yeah, not so much with this band, but I'm working on getting some material together to do a solo album eventually.
how
so
cool.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have a timeline or anything, or even a band picked out yet. But I'm starting to I've been writing a lot of instrumentals, so I have like quite a stash at home. And
Very cool.
Over the pandemic, got set
are you
up.
able to give us a preview? Sorry, I keep
That's
cutting
okay.
you off.
That's
I'm excited
okay.
to hear
No, you're
what
fine.
this
You're
sounds
fine.
like.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. This is one I wrote for my wife. That's kind of a slower, prettier one, but I'll share a little bit of it. Sure. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay. No, that's great.
Yeah, thanks.
What do you have any sort of technique or approach to writing?
Not really. I kind of try to do different songs differently. Sometimes I kind of start with like some chords, let's see. Oh man, I'm trying to. I'm like drawing blanks on all my tunes.
Or even the one that you already recorded, just in general?
Yeah, so no, I kind of do them all differently. Like, yeah, sometimes I come up with some chords that I like and I try to put a melody to it. The one I recorded with the band's called Night Sky From Here. We've been like recently working that back into the set, but it's kind of like an ostinato based thing. So I basically like wrote a part for everybody. There's kind of like a breakdown section. You can check this out on Spotify, by the way, if you're listening out there. Yeah, it's called Night Sky From Here. And so like it just starts with a banjo roll. It's in D. And the mandolin comes in with a melody right there. And then the dobro comes in. It's kind of like little pieces all together. And then it goes into... is like the bluegrass section.
Okay.
But then there's a breakdown in the middle where I go back to just kind of a roll. And guitar comes in first with like a little melody ostinato, and then dobro comes in, and then their ostinatos double in length, and it like kind of keeps going and keeps adding in more parts. Mandolin chop comes in, and then the banjo melody comes in, and then eventually it goes into like a 5/4 kind of thing where the mandolin and I are doing a 5/4 thing, and the rest of the band is continuing on the original ostinato. It kind of gets a little crazy, and then lands back in the bluegrass groove. So.
So that's fairly orchestrated for a banjo tune. That's not like ground speed or something like that.
No, that's like kind of the way I like to write. I do have some more simple tunes too, I guess, but
that's cool. So it can kind of start either way, either with a melody or chord progression or just whatever you find catches your ear.
Pretty much.
Sounds like.
Yeah, I don't really have a method.
So going back to jazz stuff, a lot of what I see you post on the socials is like transcribing horn solos or guitar solos or whatever it is. Tell us about doing that. What is your approach to that?
So
because that's some really impressive stuff.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so it's just a really good way to learn new like vocabulary, new phrases and things. One of the things that I'm sure every banjo player, every musician gets in the habit of doing is like, we all have our licks and tricks and things that we do. And, at times that can get kind of stale for everybody, myself included. I on this tour, I've been feeling that way. Like, damn, I'm playing the same thing I'm playing the same licks every night. So, then I might transcribe a solo and try to incorporate that kind of stuff into my playing. But yeah, my process for that is just to slow it down and kind of take my time moving through it. And then maybe take like a little section I might like from like a Charlie Parker solo or something. Something like that, and try to see how I might work little pieces of that into a solo and maybe a bluegrass tune or something like that. And then obviously bebop stuff too, but this is what I'm playing bluegrass, with people more than I'm playing the jazz stuff. For me is kind of like at home with a backing track.
Okay, so I think that's an important connection, because a lot of time if I take the time to do something like that, and it does take me a lot of time, a lot of it can be, I can feel like I'm wasting time because I don't always bridge that into being able to use it in my playing. It's sort of just like a fun little test for myself to see if I can do it, a challenge.
Absolutely.
But you're saying you actually try to use what you're learning.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah. I know. Well, I would like to get out and play more jazz with legit, jazz musicians, or even just like bluegrass pickers who are also interested in jazz. That that'd be fabulous too. I just have been really busy, and then the pandemic happened, and I need to get up the courage, I guess, to just bring the banjo to a jazz jam in Nashville sometime. I should do that. But
just give it a try.
Yeah. But yeah, I do. I try to take like little phrases and put it into like a bluegrass jam or something. And it's not that difficult in the band I'm playing in, because like I said, we kind of stretch out and do, the more progressive thing and do some longer jams and stuff. So I have the opportunity to throw in, a Charlie Parker phrase or a Bill Evans phrase or something that I learned.
Excellent. Let me think. Let's talk about your instruments and your gear. Tell us about what you have here, and go through all the little parts.
Sure.
You know how banjo players get. They need to know everything.
Yeah. So I'm my banjo's pretty standard. I'm playing a Huber VRB3. I got it at IBMA like 6 years ago. Played it in the showroom and fell in love with it.
Yeah.
So I brought this one home. I've got a few other banjos at home, but I'll talk about this one first. So yeah, it's just like standard what it came with, besides the Scorpion bridge on there from Silvio Ferretti. He was really generous and sent me a few in the mail, and the one I'm playing is my favorite of the group, so that's what I've been playing on this tour. And it's set up with a Fishman banjo pickup, the Rare Earth one, I believe, and I play it through a Tone Dexter, with a couple effects pedals for when we really get weird up there, which is fun. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just
I love pedals. What pedals are you using?
Yeah, it's one's like the Synth 9. I can't even remember the brand names.
That's
but
Electro Harmonics.
Yes,
one,
that's right. Yeah, it's that's right. And it's like a synth modeler, so it's kind of that one's kind of more out there, but I use it occasionally. And then the other one is it's like Earthquake or something, or it's a delay pedal.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it, but it's got like different timings you can do. Like you can do eighth notes, like in the repeats
and then tap
stuff.
it in.
Yeah, you can. There's a tap feature as well, but you can also just like set it to like do like dotted eighths or triplets or eighths, that kind of thing. So that's really cool. Yeah. So I've been messing with like doing different rolls and stuff with the delay, and it gets really fun really fast.
Yeah.
And then there's other things you can do with it, like you can like set it to like an analog sound or a digital sound, or like different kinds of algorithms is the term they use, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those both work decently well with banjo. It's sometimes tricky to find effects that'll play nice.
It is. I've never really been a big effects guy. I had used them with electric guitar, but I've just kind of been getting into them, and I feel like I'm late to the party because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had tried like some auto wahs and stuff, and they weren't really working as well. I don't know if it's just maybe the high end of the banjo just doesn't go through them as well. But it was kind of not sounding great.
Same with me. I've heard a few people use them that sound really good, and I should probably pick their brain if I care enough to get into it.
Well, let me know if you find a good one. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I know Kyle Tuttle, whatever he's using, he makes it sound really good. I don't know if it's a settings thing or if it's an equipment thing or a pickup thing.
Yeah. There's that guy, Matthew Zuckerman, I believe, out of like Baltimore, who makes pedals. I think he's made a few of Kyle's. I tried out a couple of his one time and was digging them, but I just didn't get them at the time because we kind of weren't. This band wasn't really doing that yet. It's kind of a new thing. We've kind of recently, post-pandemic, like become more
a little weirder.
Yeah.
Cool. What about everything else, like your picks and your strings and anything else that you think is important that you have a preference for? Yeah, so I use D'Addario strings. We endorse them, love their strings. I usually use like the Light Plus, a little heavier, and I like that for like the single string stuff. I've been thinking about maybe even going a little heavier lately, but so what would the Light Plus be? Is that tens or something? Yeah,
it's like 10.5, I think. Oh, okay. Like 10.5, and then like a 13 G string. So I think they're like like Bela's got that GHS set, and I think it's like pretty much the same gauges that he has on his like signature GHS set, except for the D string's a little lighter. The low D string's a little lighter. It's like a 20 instead of his is like 22. Okay. But yeah, they're a little heavier than the lights. I forget exactly the exact gauges, but I like those a lot. So I've been using those. And then my picks I'm just using like a Dunlop XL finger pick and Warren Yates's Oval 8s copies, and they're awesome. I highly recommend them. They're super comfortable. They sound really good. They feel really good. They're like my favorite picks I've ever used. Cool. I never really got super into the old Nationals just because they're pricey and I never could really find them. So, I'm sure those are amazing. But as far as like new picks, and I've played, a lot of them, the Sheelers and the Hoffmeyers and all the stuff. These are my favorites. Those are the ones you like. Although the Sheelers and the Hoffmeyers are great too. But yeah, these are my faves. Nice. Yeah. You mentioned you use the Fishman pickup. Do you use any particular microphones ever for gigs or recording that you really dig? Not really. Like at home, I have a few mics. Like I have like an SM81 and a KSM 32, a couple Shure mics, and then like if I was playing with a bluegrass band, I maybe would use the SM81 or maybe just a 57.
Yeah.
I just like the sound of a banjo through a 57. It's kind of that classic bluegrass sound. So yeah, now I'm not. I've never been like a super gear oriented guy, but now that I've kind of gotten more into doing this, professionally and playing with the band and trying to record myself at home, I've kind of been forced to pay more attention and learn more about it. So, I'll keep you updated.
Yeah. I mean, I just ask it to everyone. I find it infinitely interesting for some reason.
I love it. I love it.
Did I forget to ask you anything about like your playing style, or is there anything else that you'd want to add that, I don't know, just something you're working on that's interesting, or other advice of how to play like Alex Genova? That's what this is all about, right?
Yeah. So this jazz legend, Barry Harris, just passed away recently.
Piano guy, right?
Piano guy, yeah. And one of the things I've been working on for a while is like his rule of descending lines, where he adds extra half steps in between notes in like the Mixolydian mode, basically. So if you want to sound like me, I've been using those a lot, maybe too much, but it's a really cool concept to check out. So it's kind of this rule about adding in, so basically like it's all for descending lines. If you start on like the 1, 3, 5, or 7, you can add an extra half step between 1 and flat 7. Sorry. That kind of thing. If you start on 2, 4, 6, you can add an extra half step between 2 and 1 and flat 7, or no half steps. So, or just, or between 2 and 1 and flat 7. And then if you land on 3, 5, or 7, you can do back to rule 1, which is the 1 half step, or you can add 3 between 3 and 2, 2 and 1 and flat 7. So then
I'm gonna have to.
So I use that a lot.
Definitely gonna have to listen back to this one to follow all that.
It's cool, but you can there's some videos on YouTube too, because there's a ton of videos of him and other people talking about it too. But then you can come up with cool lines like, and add the upper structure arpeggios in there too. So like. Something like that.
Yeah.
it gives you like a real cool chromatic sound if you're into like the chromatic kind of stuff.
That sounds cool.
So it's a cool idea that just something I thought of to.
And that's YouTubeable to
absolutely
find out all these rules you call them?
Yeah, Barry Harris's like rules of descending lines, I believe, or just Google
Crazy.
Barry Harris descending rules, and you should YouTube it, and something should come up.
One of my favorite descriptions of your playing, I just had a listener who had seen you at some point say that you play fearlessly. I thought that was like just a really cool way of describing it. I assume that what they mean is that you are taking musical risks. So how would you describe your own risk taking? I assume that's like in an improvisational context is where that would happen. I don't know. Do you have like a overarching philosophy of how you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I do take risks on stage, and sometimes it doesn't always work out, and that's
where the fearlessness comes in.
That's right. It's got to be okay, and depending on the show, I might take less or more risks, if the crowd's already with us when we start, and it's, I might try to do something really extra special, and if it works out, then it's amazing, but if it's like a quiet listening room and the crowd's looking a little not tighter. A little tighter. Not sure if they're with us or not yet. Then I might, take a few less risks. But at a festival where everybody's having a good time and dancing and loving it and eating up whatever you do, then I try to give them something cool and throw in some.
Yeah. If they're in the mood to appreciate the risks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
And usually if I'm if they're into it, then I'm feeling more confident, and then there's a better chance that whatever risky things I might attempt will go well.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm not feeling as confident, then
Nice positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. Hey, so before I let you go, and I think we're timing this perfectly to escape weird sound check sounds.
I think you're right.
Make sure everyone knows how to find you and the band online. Give websites and all the plugs.
Yeah, so I don't have a website. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I've got a couple of videos on YouTube. But the band is at FiresideCollectiveBand.com, and we're easily findable on Facebook as well, and Instagram and YouTube. Fireside Collective is the name of the band. So yeah, give us a like or a follow. We're on Spotify and Apple Music. Please check our tunes out. Give us a stream right after you stream Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast.
Right. On repeat all night long.
That's right.
For days and days.
That's right.
Need my cup of coffee per year fees that Spotify gets me.
Us too.
If that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex.
Man, thank you so much
for taking the time, and looking forward to hearing the show this evening.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. The song clips you heard in this episode were Blue Is My Condition by Fireside Collective, Captain Captain by Crooked Still, Nashville Blues by J.D. Crowe and the New South, and then a couple more Fireside Collective tracks, Waiting for Tennessee and Night Sky from Here. Extra special thanks to Ricky Stanfield, today's Patreon supporter of the show. Thanks to Otis Supply for hosting the recording of this interview. And I encourage all of you to head over to patreon.com/banjopodcast to become a supporter yourself, or get a hold of me at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com with any questions or concerns, or, see you next time.